All right, here we are for the second episode of this. For our special podcast. So special that it's taken us this long for a second episode, but we're waiting for the right guest, and that is yourself, Alexa. I'm going to, like I did for Tom, try and give a very good introduction. Hopefully, I don't butcher it. But basically, I'll just give the cliff notes of what I've read from your wonderful website. So we studied musical theatre at Bath Spa University and graduated, of course.
Yep.
And then we went on to be a lead vocalist for, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Aida Cruises? Aida?
Aida?
Right?
Yeah, Aida Cruises, that's yes, it.
And you had 3 consecutive contracts before going on to a new musical project where you were the lead female protagonist, correct? And then we've gone on to be a vocal health, I'm going to say from my vantage point, because I know nothing, like almost somewhat of a specialist, a vocal health specialist in a way. Like when you obviously a teacher as well for singing, a singing teacher, but your knowledge of vocal health seems to be even surpass a lot of other singing teachers that I know. And it's very, very impressive. And also you are a writer for BritishTheatre.com and you've published things for I Sing magazine. Have I covered all the bases?
Yeah, I've probably given your job a bit. It's been a bit difficult for you because I have not updated my website, as you can probably tell if you ever visit it, in a very long time. So, but yes, that's right. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a vocal health specialist, but I've done training with vocal health first aid, which is probably what you're referring to there as or vocal health education, where the vocal health first aid comes into it. And the BritishTheatre.com, I haven't written for them for a while, but I was reviewing for a time. So yeah, and now teaching privately, and obviously where we met at Italia Conti.
Indeed. It's fine. If we look at my website, which I don't even know where that is, but that's vastly out of date, so it's okay. But what I'll do, Alexa, is we'll go back to the early days, because I actually don't think I've heard about this before, because we've spoken a lot, but I don't think I've heard about these stories. What got you into the arts? Because we all have, I don't know, a moment, a thing that kind of just captured us and like sucked us into this really weird but wonderful world.
I think I'm going to retell this in only the way that my memory is telling me it happened, but I think memory is a funky one, isn't it? And sometimes we remember things actually not the way it happened.
Yeah.
But in my memory, I just have visions of me just singing a lot. I didn't have singing lessons when I was a kid. I joined a drama club, your typical Saturday school, which I think is quite a common tendency for people to get into the arts this way. From I think when I was about 8 years old, and I went there with my sister, but my sister quickly dropped out and I carried on for pretty much 8 years after that. I think I left when I was about 16.
Wow.
And yeah, I just remember being part of the reviews and, auditioning for little parts in things. Got a little part as a lost boy in Peter Pan. And then, yeah, I think that's really how it started. And then for my 10th birthday, I got taken to see Beauty and the Beast as my first musical. And I remember just watching the stage when Be Our Guest came on, and they were all in plate costumes and dressed up as spoons. And I was so in awe of what was going on that afterwards my dad was like, "Oh, did you see that bit? Did you see that bit?" And I was like, "Nope." I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about. He was like, "Were you watching the same show?" And I just remember, I think I just was so in awe of what I was seeing. I couldn't quite believe it was real. And from then on, I just remember kind of having a bit of tug of war between storytelling and singing, and then realize, well, actually they totally combine in musical theatre. And it was something that I thought I wanted to pursue from then onwards, but had literally no clue of how to do it.
Fair. Like you and me both probably, or many people in that situation. But it's really nice to know, actually. I didn't know you went to a Saturday school. Like many people have. I didn't, but I now teach at a Saturday school, and I've seen kind of similar stories to yours. People come when they're like 6, 7, 8, and they stay till almost essentially like the bitter end until as long as they can until they have to move on. But you see that kind of love that kind of grows, or that fondness that grows. Like, was there a moment when you, like you said there, you watched Beauty and the Beast and you were in awe, but like, was there a moment where you were like actually performing and you were like, so you say got the bug and you're like, oh, this, I really like, I just want to carry on doing this?
I think the first performing memory I have is when we did a review at the Saturday School, and I was in this section of Annie, as you are. It's always Annie. And I remember there was a leader there, and she was quite an old lady, so I can only assume she's no longer with us, but she was harsh, let's say. And she would tell us, if you don't sing loud enough, you're cut. And I was like, well, my mum and dad are coming. I want to sing for them. And from that point, I just remembered that it was something I was fighting for. So I don't know if I had this like otherworldly moment where I was like, this is the thing that I need to do. It just seemed to be the thing that I was doing and continued to do, because of there seemed to be a reason that I wasn't so sure of as to why I was doing it, if that makes sense. But this particular moment was because my mum and dad were coming and I wanted to show something to them. So that would probably be my first click, if we are to call it that.
It was almost like a subconscious, like you realize that, because we don't always fight for everything, but this is something you were fighting for. Do you get what I mean?
So yeah, and I think when we're talking about like careers and things, it's like I'm fighting for this because I need to do it. I think it was a version of that, but not quite as cliche.
Yeah.
And so I felt like there was a reason that I needed to do this, and it was to show my parents something that I like to do. And from then on, I did feel, kind of those things as I moved on throughout different experiences. Like at college, I just felt there was a different version of me I could be when I was on stage. And then when I went into the kind of cruise contracts, it just felt right to be doing it. But then it was also the moment where I realized it wasn't for me.
Yes, we'll get onto that.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that actually I think you've touched on, the environment. Like not even necessarily, doesn't have to be always the performance space, but the environment surrounded by fellow creatives or people who are there for the same reason, same purpose. Like that's one of the things I find, like even just this, like us talking to one another, I don't feel like I find that in a lot of places. But apart from the arts and the creative, like, and this sense of like community and always like this genuine interest in what one another's doing, and then almost this uplifting of one another. I mean, there's the good and bad and everything, but it really seems to be within this more than a lot of different environments that I've experienced. Was that another thing that kind of, whether you realized it or not, you latched onto?
I think so. I mean, being part of a community like a Saturday School when I was so young, there was a buzz around, we're doing this thing together, we're creating something together. And those experiences are unique. And I remember some of the best times that I had was between a matinee and an evening of a Saturday School show, being with the people he were then on stage with later on. And there are some amazing moments in the midst of creation that you reflect on afterwards and think, oh, actually, I think that was quite special, actually.
When you went on to then obviously pursue this, or decided that, oh, I can do singing and storytelling together, when did it click, or when did you realize that I can go, oh, I can just go study this at Bath Spa or wherever you may first have found? And like, what was also like kind of from a family standpoint, what was their like reaction when you're like, oh, I want to be a performer? Because that's always an interesting side as well, because people have different viewpoints, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, my parents, they're not in the arts. My mum loved acting when she was younger, but it was a case of, pardon the phrase, but it was the blind leading the blind, because they had no idea they had no experience of it. I certainly didn't. And I wasn't interested in going to dance class. And I didn't know, and we didn't know how to get singing lessons, and we didn't know who it would be. It didn't even cross our minds that that would be a thing. It was kind of more of the acting route, I guess, because I did my LAMDA exams. That seemed to be the thing that I was pursuing.
Mhm.
And then it was a case of, well, I can kind of sing as well, but I have no idea how to nurture this. So my first degree that I went to do was actually in acting.
Okay.
And then but all behind this, I was like, but I want to tell stories through song. Like, how do I do that? And it was always in my path to kind of pursue a musical theatre route, but I was just on the wrong course. I was on the wrong thing.
Mhm.
So I decided after the first year at university that I would change and I would go on to their kind of new musical theatre course. And that's what I did. And I mean, as you can tell, I've got wallpaper behind me that is books. It's there to make me look cleverer than I am, Hamza, if I'm being totally honest.
I mean, it's what job well done. Succeeded.
Thank you very much. But I was always interested in stories and how they could connect us. I'm a massive bookworm. Would rather pack a book than I would my lunch in my bag. And that's saying something because I'm always hungry. So I was like, well, this has to be something. And there was a study done, I don't know how recently, but something that I was looking into where books are proven to be something which makes us more empathetic and feel more connected to other human beings because we're reading scenarios. And I feel that's the exact same power that musical theatre can have.
Mm.
And so I realized maybe when I started the musical theatre degree that there was a whole bunch of musicals beyond the commercial, beyond your amazing as they are, the Les Mis and Miss Saigons, but there were the off-Broadway stuff. There was the Jason Robert Browns that I'd never heard of. And I think when I first discovered them, that was my, okay, that's where the stories can fly as well.
Mm. The shall we say, you could say maybe the niche shows or more
maybe
the
the
smaller
ones that,
shows.
yeah, the less spectacles, if you like, even though, I mean, Les Mis is the most incredible story.
Yeah.
And I mean, I threw the book across the room after my dissertation, but the musical sure connects us. And it's a microcosm of what was going on at the time of the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, and just how amazing that we can bring these stories in and actually learn about our past and real human beings. So yeah, I think it was really when I first went on to the musical theatre degree that I discovered that.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And funnily enough, actually, yesterday I had a conversation with a peer of mine, and one of the things that we both said was like something we were looking at the future. What do we want to do? And we were like, both of us said in our own way, we want to help people, but we were like, it's amazing that we're in a world that even through a performative or a creation of some kind that allows us to help people, because it's a performance, a story that you can convey something through that can potentially touch someone in the right way and lead them in this direction or that direction, or take them out of a situation that they may be in, which is very much what, again, seems to be what pulled you, I guess, within those.
Yeah, I'd say. And I follow a great influencer, writer, content creator called Amy McNee. She's under the handle Inspired to Write, and she is so pro creatives and writing and how important art is. And I really feel like I'm buzzing for it every time I see something that she's uploaded, or the podcast she has with her husband called the Unpublished Podcast. They just talk so much sense, even down to the fact that how do you maintain love for something that is just filled with rejection?
Yes. Which you did. I mean, we're going to sidetrack now, but because you mentioned it, you did an awesome post about that a few weeks ago, which you said, like, how do you because we love this, but like everything, when we're doing it all the time, you feel like you can fall out of love with it. And like you said, there's a lot of rejection in this. I have an idea, I want to give it to someone, they reject it, or you go for an audition, you get rejected, etc., etc. But like that's yeah, it's just a fascinating concept, actually, or fascinating world, that the fact that we love this so much, but probably this is the most no's you're ever going to get in your life, is this is this world.
Yeah. And I'm in such awe of the students that I get to work with, because they're pushing and pursuing something that is not set in stone. And perhaps that's the case for a lot of industries, but it's incredibly competitive. And dare I say, maybe more presenting females than there are presenting male voices. That I'm in awe of them. And it's okay if you don't love it all the time, because part of loving it is also being a little bit annoyed with it. And that frustration can fuel us back into love, or back into finding the reason why we're doing it in the first place. And if it's in your roots, then that's okay to be frustrated. You don't have to have this burning passion for it 24/7, because I don't think it's realistic.
Yeah. But you said there, like, you're an R and some of the students, and I agree, like I also am, because like I said, there's so much, like the whole ethos, like I said earlier to you, is of the whole of Steady Stages, what the arts can give you beyond just technique and skills to perform, but life skills and what you can learn from it. Because I've seen so many people that trained or studied it, but didn't necessarily pursue it as a career, but just took a lot from it and used those skills in other areas of life. But like rejection and then learning how to deal with that creates resilience and a sense of like, even and then going into the unknown, just taking a risk. That's so many people will never ever do that in their life. But then we have hundreds of students that we then work with, or peers of ours that who just jump into this X, Y, Z. They know full well they may get a no. You said obviously, oh, if you don't sing loud enough, you're going to get cut. But my parents are going to come to watch me. But yet you throw yourself into it anyway. But that's such a skill that's actually this invaluable.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And as you say, you don't have to just take these skills and move forth into a creative field. You could use this as part of your actual way of life. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Did you start to learn that, like these kind of skills, or the translatable skills that we get from this, would you say in your studies at Bath Spa, or was it post when you went into like Ida and doing like the lead vocalist work?
I think I need to think about this answer.
Take your time.
I think I have a much better perspective on the entire world of auditioning and being a performer now than I ever did before, which I kind of wish I had back then, because that would have been very, very helpful. But I don't think I was equipped with everything I needed through my training until after I'd graduated. And so I think that's part of what fuels me as a teacher, is that I want to give as much as I can to help performers emerge into the industry with just more understanding of what they're going to need, because I really feel that was lacking for me.
That's amazing that you say that, because Tom Hyer said the exact same thing. Like, not that it's like a negative towards the training, like he got a lot from it, and I'm sure you did for yours, but he said when he went into his first job, it was like his eyes were like blown wide open, because he was like, I really don't know as much as I thought I did, or there's this whole new world, and I thought I was doing good, but actually I'm not doing that good. Because he said with him, like his thing, he said, I think he wasn't challenged enough eventually, because he got to a point where they thought he was in a very good position, that he feels that he didn't eventually then get challenged enough to take it up a notch. I don't know if that was your struggle as well, but you've kind of said the same thing. So like there was things missing when you went into the professional world. Like what was that for you?
I do think there were some skills missing on my part. I mean, I'd never danced before, and going into this industry, do you have to be an amazing dancer? Maybe not, but something would have been useful for me back then, but I wasn't interested. And that's tricky when it's part of the triple discipline.
Yeah.
And that's my part. Not necessarily anybody else's influence there. I just was not interested in going to dance class. So my training in dance started at uni. Now I've missed years of technical exposure to that point. And then vocally, I mean, voice science is still pretty young. And when I was training, even more so. So I just think the more we advance, it's my duty as a teacher to make sure I'm just as informed as I can be, so that the person in front of me gets the advantage of that. And so I don't know whether it was because I wasn't challenged, because I was given good opportunities. I just think I didn't know how to implement that for myself later down the line. Like, I didn't know how to reflect on, well, what's my voice doing there? I wonder why that. I wasn't necessarily educated on how to question or how to deeply focus in my training. And also, now that I understand a little bit more about brain development, these people are going through their training when their brains are not fully developed. And there's so much, I mean, I wouldn't go back to my teenage years for love nor money. So I kind of really feel for them. They're leaving home for the first time, most likely. They might have had their first heartbreak. They've got maybe a lot of their own stuff that they're dealing with, and their brains aren't developed. So I think, I don't know if I've answered your question there, but I think that was a challenge. I just didn't know how to take on this training and make it the best that it can be for afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I mean, I'm going to try to summarize that, and you tell me if I think I got the right gist of it.
Yeah.
You did essentially, you say you didn't know how to put the pieces together.
Yeah.
It's like, you had this little bit of this nugget of information, but I don't know how to put it all together to like move forward.
And how it applies to me as a performer. So the great thing about Italia Conti is it thrives on individualism and independent performers. And I didn't think I knew where the heck I fitted, or where my skills were lying, because there's a lack of feedback. Until you get an assessment, you don't really know what you're working with.
No, I agree. And when, but also interesting is, like, obviously, and I may show my ignorance here or my lack of knowledge, but so obviously on a cruise ship, I imagine the level of performance might be, so shall I say, more, like, so in terms of like how often you're performing, arguably more than, say, a lot of other tours or shows. Is that fair to say?
I guess it depends on what you're doing. So with AIDA, and I think this is where cruise ships have like or have had in the past, a reputation of cheesy kind of, okay, you're not as good as the people who are going to get roles in town. And I wrote an article about this for Icing magazine, about how it is one of the best jobs that you can do, in my opinion, in the performance world, because you have this contract for however long. On AIDA, we had a different show most nights. I think on my first contract, I didn't have a night off.
Oh, wow.
But I was like having the greatest time in the
day. How long was that contract?
So because it was triple, it was consecutive. So I think I was off doing it for about 18 months. Wow. Solid.
And no days off?
In rehearsals, we had one day off. But we worked Tuesday to Sunday, and then Mondays were a day off, and they were 7-hour days. They were hardcore. And then when we got on the ship, it was a case of grueling rehearsal still, whilst you kind of move into the stage and everything. And then once you're kind of into the swing of things, it calms down, and you do, you can go exploring, you can spend the day at the beach. I mean, who doesn't want to spend the day exploring a country and then go and do a show for half an hour or an hour? It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So what, I can't remember the question.
The question was, oh, I actually didn't think I finished the question actually,
Oh,
because you corrected me on my
got ya.
my misinformation. But I was going to say, we saw you spoke about what you lacked coming out of drama school,
Yeah.
and then the consistency of the performances for like such a job.
Mm.
How, like, what's that transition like going into that, where you're then performing night after night after night after night, and you're not fully developed, and you're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and but you're having to do it constantly.
Mm.
So what was that transition like?
So between me graduating and getting my first contract, I think it was about a year
Mm-hmm.
and a bit. I may have
Sure.
dabbled in a couple of things, but nothing big. So at that point, as a performer, you kind of panic. You kind of think, well, there's another whole host of people coming out now, and I haven't had a job yet. So it kind of just adds fuel to the fire, to be honest. It wasn't enjoyable, but I had a lovely agent who was, you know, very communicative. She was always there to kind of pick up the phone and chat with you. So I was lucky in that sense. And I just happened to go to this audition and got offered the triple contract. And it's kind of a bit like a whirlwind, because I got offered it and within 2 weeks I had to go. So you've waited quite a long time, and then it's all like a big rush, if you like.
Yeah. And there you're almost kind of uprooting your life in a way as well, aren't you?
Yeah, because everything was over to Germany for the rehearsals, and then you were off doing the tours of wherever you were kind of sent to. So I don't know if I had much time to think about it, but the shows were quite versatile. Like, you had some jazz, some rock, you had the musical show that they put on that was written specifically for the show. But you were following a particular track, so you might have been considered a mezzo soprano or an alto. So, but it was on the cruise that I was like, okay, this feels great. This is the best time of my life, but it's not right. And that was weird.
Yeah, because I do remember you telling me this, I think when we had lunch a few months ago, and as we do, we talk about all sorts of like many things, and then you saying that. What was the, like, I was going to ask my question before you mentioned that, actually, was what was your biggest takeaway from that experience? But you could do it twofold. What, because I imagine that was your biggest takeaway, is that I don't want to do this, but I don't want to perform. But what was your biggest takeaway from perhaps a learning curve as far as like skill, technique, and then also what led to the I don't want to actually perform anymore?
I think one of the biggest things I took away from it was I could actually do that. I actually had the skills to do it. And I could find the confidence, even if it felt fake to start with. I could find the level of performance I needed to get to, and that I didn't have to be the world's greatest dancer. I could move, and that was fine for that role. So the fact that I was able to go up and really enjoy it. I mean, there was one show that I detested, but we all have those.
Sure.
But I had the best time up there. And so I was like, okay, I've felt that now. It's not what I want, but I felt it, and I'm really proud of myself.
So was it just a case of like, okay, I've done it now, so I don't need to do it again? Was that not like, so it wasn't like I don't like this, it's just like, oh, it's done?
I think afterwards, when I remember the exact moment that I was like, this, I don't know if this is for me, was when we were in a rehearsal, and it'd been quite a grueling rehearsal because it was all in a different language, and so it was phonetic work, and then it was putting it all together, and it didn't go too well for the group as a whole, which it doesn't always, which is totally fine. But I just remember thinking, I don't think this is right. There's something inside that doesn't feel right. And then afterwards, I was not really looking forward to going back to auditioning. I did not enjoy the whole audition process. And it kind of filled me with dread. And, you know, there's things that get said to you along the way that you think they stick with you, unfortunately, and hopefully you can kind of try to reframe them. Things like, you're too nice to be a performer. And I was like, Well, that
It
makes me
becomes a negative quality, which is funny.
because it never plot. And also, well, who says every performer has to be an a-hole
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do this?
You'd rather, I would like to think you'd rather that not be the case.
Well, and I just thought, well, if I have to change who I am to be a performer, then that's nothing's worth that.
Mm.
So
That's fair. I mean,
yeah.
so then how long after that did we start to then transition? Because it wasn't like you fell out of love with this. You just didn't want to perform.
Yeah.
So you just wanted to do it in a different way, which you absolutely have. So when did you start to be like, okay, I want to go into, I don't know, teaching?
I think I decided that I didn't want to perform anymore. And then I had a job, data entry stuff that was in an office. Well, and because they allowed you to go to auditions. So I was sticking there for a bit, trying to figure out what to do. And it was hurting my soul going in there every day. Absolutely nothing wrong with those careers, and absolutely great for people who want to follow that. But I would cry. I would be like, this is not where my energy needs to be placed. I just had this very visceral feeling of being in the wrong place at every turn. And so I think it was my husband who was like, well, why don't you try to go into teaching? And I thought, do I want to teach? I'm not sure. It wasn't something I'd had any experience of. It hadn't ever really crossed my mind to do that. But I thought, okay, well, let's see if this is something that I like to do. So I literally just started to get together with a friend and somebody. I reached out to the people in the office and I was like, is anyone interested in singing? And I had two people who came to me, and I quickly realized, okay, I can kind of figure out stuff now that's going on in my voice, but I have no idea how to help another human being in this position. And that's when I found BAST training, an educational program, awesome program, which did a 20-hour course at the time. They still do the foundation course, but they've also got a level 5 qualification now, which is great. So I did their foundation course and literally just made myself a sponge with podcasts and courses, and just tried my best to learn. And I loved it. I loved the voice science. I thought if they could teach this at school instead of getting me to work out photosynthesis by dotting a page for the bubbles, that would have been maybe more of an awakening for me. Alas, you don't get that. But that was really interesting. And then I just seemed to, after I graduated with BAST, I seemed to get this job as a singing teacher at a dance school in Wokingham. And it was my first real burst of teaching. And I just quickly realized that, okay, I kind of like this. I think this is quite cool and I'm interested. And it felt so much better being on the other side, but also being able to empathize when someone was like, I've got this audition. I'd be like, okay, I know exactly where you're at.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah.
Did you have me and Tom spoke about this actually, and because I think similar to yourself, when you said, oh, I had no interest or no thought about teaching, 100% the same. Like if you told me shortly after university or during university, I would have been like, absolutely not, like never. And now, like you and I both, I know, love it and have such gratification doing it, and so rewarding, and I wouldn't trade it. But did you ever feel like that imposter syndrome at the beginning, to be like, why are you asking? Like, because they look to you as like, you know, everything, which obviously no one knows everything, but they kind of look to you as like the expert. So like they're wide open, especially when like the way we do it, often we do it one-on-one. So we're the voice that is guiding everything. And or like I sometimes at the beginning, they looked at me and I was like, oh, in my head, I'm like, I don't know, but I think this might be the right answer. Like, did you ever have that moment and like slowly realize like, actually, maybe I do know what I'm talking about?
I probably have imposter syndrome on a weekly basis. It's something that is just creeps up most of the time. And in fact, I did a talk on it at the Vocology and Practice event in March, because I think it's something that a lot of us teachers feel, and maybe there's something there from this phrase that gets tossed around, and I think it came from a play. I think it's George Bernard Shaw who actually wrote it down, that those who can't teach. And so it hangs over you, that is something that people A, believe, or B, attached to you because you're teaching in an industry where you tried but then decide that it wasn't for you. Like, so yeah, 100% I get imposter syndrome still, and probably will do, but I also hope that I try to practice reframing it so into something that fuels me. If I don't know the answer, it doesn't mean that I'm bad. It just means, oh, I've got something to learn. Or I can just actually realize I do know what the next step could be.
Yeah.
And actually the power of saying, you know what, I'm not too sure. Let's try this. If it doesn't stick, that's absolutely fine. I'll get back to you with something next time.
Yeah.
I think trying to pretend that you know everything is just gonna hurt you more down the line.
Yeah, no, 100%. And one of the things I think for me that clicked when I felt like I clicked with you quite quickly was I felt we had a very similar mentality, certainly as teachers, because like in terms of the care and like how much you care for your students, the willingness to want to go above and beyond, sometimes also seeing them as humans first. I think like you, or like not in a negative way, but I think when anyone teaches for a period of time, I think sometimes people can lose that. They become like almost drill sergeants in a way of just like, here's what I've got to tell you, boom, boom, boom. Whereas like for me, it's like human first. How are they doing? Okay, cool. Can I help? Do I need to help in that situation emotionally, should I say? And then, okay, now let's get to the work that you need to do, which I feel like you are very much the same as I in that regard. We come at it from two different standpoints. Sometimes when you're doing a singing teacher, I'm like learning support, but similar principles, and like the principles still apply, shall we say? And again, obviously, the feeling that you get, and I see it on your like Instagram, and obviously the way when we talk to one another, that the rewarded feeling of when they thrive, they succeed, that joy, it's like it's indescribable. It's like, so when did like, I don't know, when did you realize that this was like something you love to do, and how like, you know, how rewarding it felt, like you, and like when did you realize like, okay, this is how I approach this teaching? Sorry, that was very wordy there, but no, I was getting to it.
I think in moments in lessons where you see students' eyes light up, that was always quite a really rewarding feeling for me. And it's not to say that there's every lesson, it doesn't have to have a breakthrough moment. I don't think that that's realistic.
No.
But you're not, the voice is such it's so within us physically and spiritually, emotionally, that you can't not consider the actual human being as well, because the voice is impacted by everything. You could have a flat foot and it affects your voice. And so every lesson that I do, whether that's a private one-to-one or whether that's at the drama school setting, it always starts with a check-in. And whether that's, let's just say out of 10, how many happy chips or tokens do you have today? Because if someone says, I'm a 2, it's going to completely change the lesson or what we do in the lesson. I'm not going to be throwing loads of things at them. We're not going to be challenging too much of different things, and because it's just not going to work. We learn best when we're happy, but we're not going to be happy all the time. Again, that's just an unrealistic thing. And it's not there for anyone to feel they have to elaborate or to open up. I mean, at Conti, we have a great well-being team, but in my one-to-one sessions, I might be that well-being person. I'm not a trained therapist or psychoanalyst or anything like that, but there is a lot of links between a therapeutic setting and a singing lesson a lot of the time. So we'll always start with a check-in. And when singers see that you're interested or that you care and that you remembered that they had an important meeting or they were seeing a particular agent 2 weeks ago, they start to realize that you're actually invested in them. And I do get really quite invested. And I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine it's a similar feeling to like seeing them on stage, feeling overwhelming kind of sickness because you just want them to do well. And when you've got 18 of them on the stage, it's quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, they're there. And it's a lovely feeling though, because you're so proud of them.
Yeah.
And it's a real visceral emotion that I feel.
Do you get more out of that than you did when you performed for yourself?
Yeah, I think I do. I still got a buzz when I was performing, but I would rather they were doing it. I'd rather you go and do that thing and I'll sit here and cheer you on. Because I don't want to do it.
But it all kind of seems to go back to that thing you said at the beginning, right? The connection, storytelling. And this is like, now we're connecting with these other people and then they're going on to do it and you see them thrive. And it's just like this odd, like all these dots seem to connect. Do you know what I mean? Even like what I was saying, I want to give back to people or want to help people. But then seeing them thrive and like overcome hurdles that, you know, you become aware of because they open up to you or whatever. And then you see them do that. Then it's like, for me, again, I find that more rewarding than me going and doing something and being like, hey, I'm amazing.
Yeah. I think storytelling is one of the most otherworldly things that we can feel, but being in the world itself, that was a really silly way of putting it, but it's something that means a lot to me and that I feel holds a huge amount of importance. And if you can do it whilst singing your head off in a really healthy and efficient and repeatable way, like amazing. I want to help you do that. And I want to make that connection. And we're a team. I think that's the thing. It's really not, it used to be back in the day a kind of master student sort of relationship, but it's so us rather than you and me. It's a team.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. Like that's again another reason why I said earlier, I was like, oh, I really click with this person, because I was like, everything you say, I agreed 100%. Or well, you didn't even know that's what I thought, but I was like, no, I agree 100%. We just had obviously a bunch of graduates, and obviously across the country and around the world, people are graduating and going into the industry. What would your biggest advice be to them going out into the big bad world now, or they already have for a few weeks or months? Like, what would your advice be? Because you mentioned earlier, I was like, I didn't know things about auditions or this or that. It's like, is there one or two things that you'd say, these are the biggest things I would tell you?
One for sure would be, don't underestimate your right to express and be in the room. You don't, like, you have as much right to be there as anyone else, especially when you're going to like drama school auditions, sitting on some of the panels. Like, no apologies, go in and do your thing, because you have the human right to be there. Everybody has the human right of expression. Secondly, I would say, how can I put this? It's really in alignment with don't lose yourself. If you don't think something is feeling right, you don't have to push. If you feel like that thing that that's being asked of you is unsafe, vocally or whatever, then there should be a team around you who can find another way in. So please don't be afraid to express that to somebody, and keep your vocal health as paramount, because it's your longevity as a performer will count on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I may have more in the future.
I mean, I guess I have to ask, and then you can't, I imagine there's so much to it, but if you had to give quick tidbits of like vocal health, because you said that like keep your vocal health in check, if you had to give like the Cliff Note version of make sure you did this, like what would you say?
Oh golly, I don't know.
I could tell people to take care of your vocal health, but that's as far as I can go. I can't say beyond that. Be like, do this or do that.
Oh God, you know what? I don't think there is a possibility of making cliff notes of this, but top tips on a very kind of covers a lot of ground. Hydrate. Your voice needs flexibility. It requires you to be agile and move across range. And the way to make your voice flexible is hydration. It lowers the amount of effort we need to sing. And less effort, great, I'll take it all day long. So water, please. And the best way to know if you're hydrated, as a lot of the textbooks say, is to pee pale. So even though it's not as glamorous as it should be, just take a little look after a toilet. And if you're apple juicy, you need some water, would be a very big vocal health tip. The one is just look out for myths like don't eat chocolate before you sing is one that's done the rounds for years. I mean, I'm not saying that chocolate before singing will help. It might not hinder you unless it's a reflux kind of issue. But it's just because it's kind of viscous. It clings, dairy clings to, or milk anyway, clings to our throats. A bit like if you had a glass of milk and you swirled it around, the milk just hangs on to the glass.
Oh wow.
And that's basically what's just happening inside. So just have some water afterwards, but there's nothing to suggest that dairy does anything to the voice so far.
You learn something new every day. That's for me.
There you go. And otherwise, like, I think we seem the performers have a very glamorous lifestyle, but actually it's a bit fun police. So don't go out into a nightclub and sing along with Beyonce and expect your voice to be kind of awake and ready the next day. Kind of loud noises is something called the Lombard effect. It means that we tend to raise our pitch and we get louder to travel over that noise, and it doesn't like it. So I think it's just about keeping in check with how you're using your voice on a day-to-day basis. Are you stretching it? Are you exercising it? But also, are you doing the things like managing allergies, hydrating, sleep, not exacerbating or trying to steer away from reflux a lot. I mean, I could go on for such a long time, but lifestyle is a big one.
Fair. And you sound like a gym coach there as well.
I know, right? That's the thing with singing teaching. You're never really just in singing land. You're in all lands. It's quite cool.
Well, and to close off with, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, Alexa, but I mean, we don't have the time, and we could go for hours, but I won't keep you that long. Maybe we'll do a part 2 in the future,
and not in the blimmin' summer. I'm sweating buckets.
We'll do Christmas season.
That'll be lovely. I can have a snuggly jumper then, but even the thought right now is, absolutely sweating me off.
But one of the things, again, from the outskirts that I admire looking at you now is you did the performing, wasn't for you, but now you seem to have found like this really wonderful position for yourself where you're really happy with what you're doing. Obviously, I didn't even touch on you touched on the writing stuff earlier, but you still do a bit of that. Obviously, there's the podcasting things that you do, and of course, teaching, vocal health, etc. What's your future ambitions, and what's your key to having just joy with what you do and in thriving in the arts? Because that's a loaded question, to be fair, but what's your do you have a process that will you say this? I do these things to make sure I'm like stay balanced and kind of enjoy what I do.
I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, in terms of what my values are. And I think it's something that I like to do, just check in with my values and see what do I really believe is me. And you can always feel it. Well, I can always feel it when my energy is not being placed correctly or in a balanced way. And that's one of them. Balance is something that I really value. So if I'm finding that all I'm doing is working or studying or teaching a lot, I'll feel that burnout start to happen. Whereas equally, if I'm finding myself with too many rest hours, then I start to get itchy and I think, oh, I need balance. And I think that's balance, not just in work-life balance, but in creativity, variety. So I'm going to keep writing and see, maybe something will happen there. If the idea of seeing a book of mine in Waterstones is something that would, make me wet myself, to be honest. So that would be a dream. But I remember kind of writing out my goals as a singing teacher. And on them, I was looking back at them the other day. It was things like teach at a drama school and write for iSing magazine and do a presentation for Vocology in Practice. And I hadn't realized I'd actually could tick those off.
Wow.
And it was quite amazing, really. And I think it's just, you just got to reach out to people. And I remember Claire Delaney, who's one of our other lovely teachers at Conti, she was saying, like, the worst thing you're going to be told is no. So if you want something, just reach out. And I think it comes back to what you say, as a performer, you're used to a rejection of some sort. You know what it kind of feels like to get a no. So the more you can build up that resilience, it's going to seep into the other parts of your life. So I'm hoping that I can continue to reach out and ask for things, opportunities, or offer something, and see what happens. But I don't necessarily have a concrete plan. I'm quite happy with how things are.
That's the perfect answer, I think. And honestly, it sounds like such a small thing, but your ability, the fact that you tick those things off, like, that's actually amazing. And like, it shouldn't be like understated. Like, I had these goals and I achieved them. And also to see like the joy that you have in your work and proves that it's kind of worth it.
And it's also a real testament to everyone that you have around you as a self-employed person. Your clients, people like you and the team at Conti, the other teachers, Sarah Joyce and Tom Heyer, and everybody else that you meet along the way, everybody at BAST, it feels like an Oscar acceptance speech, sorry. Everybody at BAST, they're there kind of believing in you. And I feel like that's the network we need as creatives, as soul traders, as performers. We need the people who are going to build us up, catch us when we fall, because we're inevitably going to take a few bruises here and there, but that will be open to hearing what else you've got to say. And I think that's just awesome. No,
and I think that's the best way to finish it, because that was lovely. Thanks, Alexa. I honestly, I always love talking to you, and this has been no different. So I really appreciate the time.
Right back at you, Hamza. Thank you so much.
Like I said, let's do this again in Christmas.